Okay, so we'll make a start. For those who don't know, I'm Heather-Jane from the charity Spirit of Peace, which has taken the lead in organising this evening. But I'm joined here by my colleagues from other organisations, and you'll hear a little bit from them before we introduce our speakers. So first of all, I'd just like to give a little introduction, a background to the call. Since October the 7th, I had become very aware of just how very difficult it was for the work of the peacemakers in Palestine and Israel to go ahead. And many of them found themselves unable to meet or even speak to each other. And then I saw an article in the Jerusalem Post. It talked about how combatants of peace had been able to stay together, to keep working together, and to overcome all the physical and emotional barriers to meet.
Maybe the vote is to somebody else.
There's some feedback, Heather-Jane. There's some feedback from somebody. Isabel, can you tell everybody to mute themselves?
Yes, if everybody could just mute yourselves, please, except the speakers and the chair, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I thought it would be really good to hear from them because they had been able to stay in touch through this whole time and work together. And that's something that wasn't even happening in England. We found it very hard here to hold conversations, and still many people find it hard to hold conversations about the situation. So now I'm just going to hand over to the Reverend Dr. Liz Carmichael, who is going to tell you about two of the other host organisations.
Right, hello, good evening, everybody. I'm here to introduce Oxford Three Faiths Encounter and OxPeace. So the Three Faiths Encounter has a history going way back to about 1980, when people who had been in academic discussions between particularly Christians and Jews in Germany branched out into being Jewish, Christian and Muslim, and started meetings at a place called Amadown, a retreat house in the countryside near Bath, in Somerset. And every 2 years, they put on an encounter week where people could come, get to understand each other, get to form friendships, and get to share as far as possible in the worship of each faith. So a very open and honest sharing took place in that setting, meeting us as who we are and not trying to get to a sort of lowest common denominator. And that works very well to create real relationships and friendships. One of the people who we should salute here, who's here tonight, is Rabbi Michael Hilton, who has been involved right from the beginning. So thanks, Michael. And then around 6 years ago, we moved from the Amadown setting to Oxford, where we've been able to have a couple of residential events. The last one was, of course, on climate change and care for the environment, the creation, and various meetings on Zoom as well. So that's the Oxford now, three faiths encounter. And then OxPeace is an academic, voluntary, multidisciplinary network in Oxford to promote the study of peace and peacemaking and peacekeeping and peace building in Oxford and beyond. And we have a big worldwide contact list. We have an annual day conference, and we also put on training in mediation and negotiation. So welcome to all the OxPeace people and to all the Oxford Three Faiths Encounter people. And I now hand on.
It's back to me, I'm afraid.
Somebody else, Heather-Jane again.
So, yes, Spirit of Peace is the third host of this evening. Our work aims to contribute to creating a world where both people and planet can flourish together. The work started in 2001 when we started to support peace builders from Palestine and Israel, known then as the Jerusalem Peacemakers. And they were both Palestinians and Israelis working together for peace. And our work since then has grown and branched off into many different areas of community cohesion, earth and human flourishing, and many other things. But you could see that on our website. And we were able to register as a charity in 2007. So I'm just going to take a little time to say a little bit about Combatants for Peace, and then to introduce our wonderful speakers for this evening. So Combatants for Peace is a grassroots movement of Israelis and Palestinians working together to end the occupation, bring peace, equality, and freedom to the land. Committed to non-violence since their inception in 2006, they use civil resistance, education, and other creative means of activism to transform systems of oppression and build a free and peaceful future from the ground up. They were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 and 18. They have a vision for the future where all people can live with dignity, justice, and liberty. But I'm particularly delighted tonight to be able to introduce the two executive co-directors, Rana Salman and Eszter Koranyi. Rana, I've known for maybe 12, maybe 15 years, I'm not quite sure, both through my visits to Bethlehem and also through her presentations in the UK and at the Greenbelt Festival, which, for those who might not have heard of it, it is a music and social justice festival which takes place once a year over the August bank holiday. And I think one night when Rana was in a tent, the temperature went down to 2 degrees. Rana is a capable and a humble leader. When I first met her, she worked for a Palestinian NGO which was committed to the principles of non-violence, which supported the Palestinian population in lots of different ways, including house rebuilding projects. And it was committed to a path to end the occupation and oppression. Later, she was co-founder of Peace by Peace Tours, which aimed to connect the world and create life-changing experiences. And there's some wonderful things on their website about just how life-changing it was for people. And Eszter, who it's only been my pleasure to meet relatively recently through organising this call. She's an experienced youth worker, project leader, trainer, and has worked with the Erasmus EU programme for education, training, youth and sport. She's experienced in organisational development and consulting. And I found something on the internet that she wrote, so I hope it's okay to quote it here. When times are dark and political powers are oppressive, we, the ordinary people all over the world, and especially in the land, have the power to create change from the bottom up. Our aim is to challenge the status quo and set the foundation for a new reality based on mutual respect, dignity, and equality for all. And I think this is very important. Change starts with the ability to hear, feel, and acknowledge the pain of the other. So I'm now delighted to hand over to Imam Dr Monawar Hussain, who will chair the next part of the meeting. He's the founder of the Oxford Foundation. I think that was 2009.
I've not quite got my PhD yet, Heather-Jane, but yes, it's 2009 for the foundation.
Oh,
So thank you very much, but I am not a doctor.
Okay, but he's an incredible leader in many faith and civic roles,
Yeah.
and also served as the High Sheriff of Oxfordshire in the year 2021 to 22. So welcome, illustrious Monawar.
No, thank you very much, Heather-Jane and Isabel, and the committee, really, the organising committee, and also everyone else who've come to join us, and especially Eszter and Rana. Thank you. And it's so important to create these shared spaces for peace and be a voice for peace rather than for conflict and war and suffering and so on. So thank you very much, Rana and Eszter, for being here. And I've been given this great honor of chairing this. So I'm going to sort of start with some questions. So for about 45 minutes or an hour, Rana and Eszter will be in conversation with me, and then we'll move on to question and answers. So if I can begin with you, Rana, please tell us a bit about the history of Combatants for Peace.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's very nice to be here and to see you, and thank you for inviting us to speak. And thank you, Heather-Jane, for the beautiful introduction. It's great to connect with you today, and thank you for taking the time to hear from us. Actually, as you mentioned in the very beginning, the history of Combatants for Peace goes back 20 years ago. It was founded back in 2006 by really courageous individuals who actually took a really courageous decision. It was back in 2006 when ex-combatants, both from Palestinian side and Israeli side, Israelis who were serving in elite military units, very high prestigious serving units in the army, who decided to refuse to serve because of what they have witnessed by the army committing injustices. And Palestinian freedom fighters who used to resist the occupation using violent means and spend time in Israeli jails. And there was a big scandal back then, especially in the Israeli society, when those Israeli combatants brought this letter and refused to continue to serve. And that's how the Palestinian side heard about them, and they tried to make a contact. And then they decided to meet secretly in Area C. And after several meetings, after they have built the trust between them and shared their personal stories and acknowledged each other, it was a transformational journey that have led to actually establishing Combatants for Peace. And today the movement is more inclusive. We also have ex-combatants, we have refusenicks, nonviolent activists, we have women, we have young generation also joining the movement. Everybody who believes in the values of nonviolence, our shared humanity, and peace, and justice, and equality, and our collective liberation, they all can be members and activists in the movement.
Thank you, Rana, for that. And I suppose a follow-up question, both to yourself and to Eszter, is what was it? Where did the inspiration for you individually come from to be involved, to get involved with Combatants for Peace? So that's for both Rana and for Eszter. What made you become involved in Combatants for Peace?
Basically, for me, I joined the movement about 4 years ago. And as Heather-Jane mentioned, I used to work in a different NGO working in alternative tourism. And basically, it was about organizing meetings and different experiences for international groups visiting the Holy Land. So it was about not visiting only the dead stones, as we call them, but also the living stones, to meet the people of the land, hear their stories, their testimonies, experience their life under occupation, and also hear from the Israeli side, like from different perspectives about this conflict, visit refugee camps, settlements, meet different human rights organizations. And actually, one of the organizations that I used to organize for the groups to meet is Combatants for Peace. And I was inspired when I heard an Israeli and a Palestinian ex-combatants share their personal story and the transformation journey that they had, how they transformed from using violence as a means to resist occupation to non-violence, and how they do it also together, co-resisting the occupation and the oppressive system that we all live under. And that actually was very inspiring and very moving. And I think this actually inspired me later also, like when I had the opportunity to be part of this movement. And I started working in the office as an office manager, and then I became the first female executive director in the Palestinian side.
Great, thank you. Eszter?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. So for me, as Heather-Jane said already, I'm from Hungary, and actually I didn't imagine that I was gonna live my adult life, or so far it has been the case in Israel. I came here because I was very interested in the country, and also I lived in a kibbutz, in a small intentional community in the south of Israel for 3 years, which I took as an adventure, and discovering this form of community, of living together, also partly based on the stories I used to hear from my grandparents, who had a lot of friends. They were part of the Shomer HaTzair youth movement before the war in Hungary, and a lot of their friends went after the war and after the Shoah to Israel and lived in kibbutzes. So that was like part of my interest. The other part of my interest was specifically to this community. And after 3 years, I decided that I will discover a bit more what is this whole place about. I was in the kibbutz in 2014 when the last big war on Gaza happened. So I got a little bit of a clue already that something is not okay, and also how they dealt with loss and war and violence in the kibbutz. On one hand, it was very beautiful. On the other hand, it was very much like focused only on the small community, and it seemed to me that they are actually trying to stop the violence or calling for a bigger change. So I went to Jerusalem to see a bit more and to understand the core of the land, and to also to learn about the conflict. And that's when I met Combatants for Peace through Suleiman Khatib, one of the founders. And I also met my partner, who is now my husband, and he's from Jerusalem, from a Jewish family. So when we got married, it was very clear that I'm staying, because he didn't want to go to Hungary. And I made myself a promise that I don't want to take it for granted that I, just because I'm Jewish, have the right to live here as that's not me. Yeah. So yeah, when it got clear that I'm going to live on the land in Jerusalem, I made a promise to myself that I will work in a way to make this place equal for everyone and free for everyone, because I don't want to just enjoy me being free while knowing very well that other people who live in this land, who are indigenous to this land, such as Rana, don't have the same rights. And I didn't know what kind of form this is gonna have in my life, but then came a job offer basically from Combatants from Peace in 2017, which I gladly accepted, and I was accepted to work with them. And since then, it started very small, like I just had a very little role, and then it grew through a lot of projects and adventures. And since actually now it's a year, I joined Rana as the second female CEO of the movement.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Eszter. Could I ask both of you, one of the questions we've been given is to, could you shed some light on what is happening after the ceasefire now in West Bank? Because we hear all some coverage on media, but would both of you shed some light on what's going on in the West Bank at the moment? Could you unmute Isabel? Could you unmute Rana and Eszter, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, we're not having a complete ceasefire, as one of our activists said today, because right after the ceasefire and the exchange deal, violence have escalated in the West Bank. And because of that, there has been more restrictions of movement, more closures, more roadblocks. In the West Bank alone, there are about now 898 military checkpoints closing all of the West Bank. 18 of them have been installed just in the beginning of this year. I live in Bethlehem in the West Bank, and the city is also surrounded by military checkpoints, about 53 checkpoints that are closing all the entrances and exit points of the city. So it makes it very difficult to travel around or to leave the West Bank, like to go from Bethlehem to Ramallah or to Jericho. Sometimes you can spend hours on the checkpoints, and it's very, very difficult, especially for people who are traveling with small children or like elderly for long hours waiting. Also, violence have escalated by extremist settlers in the West Bank. And we just have seen a few days ago in Funduk, in one of the villages, burning vehicles and Palestinian farms and properties. And that was right after the American administration with Trump decision to cancel the sanctions on Israeli extremist violent settlers, which allowed them to actually commit more violence against Palestinians. And there is so much fear and a sense of insecurity within the West Bank, not knowing what's going to happen. There has been so many invasions in the cities of Jenin and Tulkarem. Some people were forced to leave their homes in Tulkarem refugee camp. The military has damaged the infrastructure and homes, and cutting the electricity and water, making it very difficult to connect people with each other, more displacing also the Palestinians. So it's people are afraid that what has happened in Gaza is currently happening also in the West Bank. And yeah, like we're watching the news and the exchange deal, hoping that it will continue as it is. People are finally taking a breath. Families are reunited, as we see. There is feeling of joy, but it's not complete. There is still sadness of loss and grief and the destruction that people are going back to. Instead of going back to their homes, some people are going back to destruction. So it's still very emotional and very difficult time for everyone here. And also like hearing with Trump's proposals to relocate Palestinians in Gaza to Egypt or to Jordan or like Albania and Indonesia. So it's a matter of seeing how much dehumanizing the Palestinian people and the right to their land, whether in Gaza and the West Bank. So it's still there is still fear of the future.
I will just add that we, as like left-wing or peace activists, obviously follow with a very, very big worry on what is going on in the West Bank. But most of Israelis actually don't know, because they are focusing on Gaza, they are focusing on the hostage and prisoner exchange, on whether the ceasefire is going to hold or not towards Gaza and Hamas, because obviously what Rana described, we can't call it a ceasefire on the West Bank. So there is a lot of tension also in the Israeli society between people who think that the ceasefire should be only temporary, and as long as Hamas is not fully out of the picture, Israel should continue the war, and others who say that this like military solution is not a solution, and there should be an idea, plan what to do with the West Bank, what to do with Gaza and the West Bank in a more peaceful way, involving also regional powers and other Arab countries. And also there are other tensions, also a lot of fear, because a lot of the prisoners who are now being released were in prison just because they posted something on Facebook. But there are also others, a minority, who are actually terrorists and killed innocent people, and the families who now see the person who killed one of their family members being released from prison. Obviously, they go through a lot, and this is also very much communicated in media. So yeah, I think it's like a lot of tension, a lot of uncertainty for the future, and we are trying to call the attention of the general Israeli public also for what is going on the West Bank, and that it should also be the scope of the demonstrations to ask to stop it as well.
Sorry, there's a slight pause for me because I'm muted and I can't unmute myself because Isabel has the control. But thank you, Eszter and Rana. And I suppose one of the questions that comes to my mind, and I often think about how can we actually bring about peace between two communities who are so traumatized and so hurt, and how can a process of reconciliation and healing take place? How can actually people be able to share the hurt and the trauma and the history of what they've gone through with each other, to bring and to start a process of healing and reconciliation? Would you just sort of shed any light on what your thoughts are on that? Is that a possibility? Because we often hear about the two-state solution, but I just, the more I reflect on it, I just think we need to have this process of healing and people's pain that they've gone through, shared, or both communities sharing that with each other, and each one listening to each other, before we can get to a state where people can live together in peace. So would you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think it's very obviously part of it, so I can relate and resonate to what you just said. And indeed, one of the tools that we are using is storytelling, telling the personal stories of transformation. We just discussed this on our weekly team meeting today, whether like only combatants are a valid representative of what we are doing, or everyone who feels like joining and joining the movement, joining this journey of transformation. And the conclusion, or it's just an interim conclusion, we still have a lot of work in front of us, obviously, but what we thought is that we are all raised with a certain narrative, which is usually very, very one-sided, and it can also be a very nationalistic, or like a very, like protecting the group that we identify with, and not really considering the other group or groups around us. And this is also, like, I can say it's in a way true also for diaspora Jewish people, where I grew up, and definitely very, very strong in Israel and also in Palestine. So our view is that all stories, like everyone who joins us goes through a certain transformation, like a certain eye-opening experience, which will make us go out from the narrative that we grew up with, and to choosing another way, choosing a different community, which sometimes has also a big price to pay, because not everyone's family and friends are accepting and willing to go with the choice of certain of the people who choose this path. So we consider very, very important to tell the stories of transformation, to listen to each other, to practice this way of creating a community, which also serves as an example. Like one day when there's going to be peace, this work will be done on a much higher scale, and we believe that having the knowledge and having the experience will also support a bigger crowd to do the same.
And related to that, there's the question. I mean, you're committed to the Combatants for Peace, are committed to non-violence, and could you share a bit about why that is, but also share about the work that you do, in addition to sort of sharing stories and creating spaces where both Israelis and Palestinians can come together and share and work together for the common good, which is peace.
Rana, I think it's your turn.
Okay, so I'll share a little bit about what we do. As we mentioned, our core value is nonviolence, and it's not just a principle that we follow, but it's also a practice that we do in everything that we plan and work on. And this includes our work on the ground, whether it's through raising awareness through our nonviolent demonstrations that we do also jointly, or solidarity campaigns. We also provide protective presence for Palestinian communities, especially in Area C, that are being threatened by settler and military violence. So our activists actually join these communities and escort them as they graze their sheep, provide protective presence for them. We also focus on education as a tool and empowerment, especially for young generations. We have a program that is called Freedom School, and we do it for both in Palestine and in Israel. In Palestine, it's for young people between the ages of 18 and 28 years old, where they actually, we have cohorts and they meet for about 6 months program, and they learn about the occupation, the conflict, the different narratives. They learn how to share their personal story, as it's a powerful tool. As we mentioned, it's the DNA of the movement. They learn how to use social media to make campaigns, and they also learn how to do joint initiatives together with their peers from the Israeli Freedom School, in which we also have a different kind of program to learn more about the occupation and meet with different human rights organizations, meet with our activists, learn about nonviolence resistance, nonviolence struggle, and how it was successful in different models around the world, and how to use that in our daily lives, whether nonviolence communication is also part of the things that we teach. And we also focus on, as you mentioned, the reconciliation and acknowledging the pain of the other. We actually have joint ceremonies that we organize annually. We have been organizing this year, which will be the 20th year that we organize the Israeli-Palestinian Joint Memorial Ceremony. And it's basically, it's a sacred day in Israel in which they remember the fallen soldiers or the victims of the conflict. But at Combatants for Peace, we do it in an alternative way. And we remember all the victims of the conflict, Palestinians and Israelis. And we hear from bereaved families who lost loved ones during this conflict, and especially because of last year we focused on the war in Gaza and the loss of also Israeli families. And we also do a joint Nakba remembrance ceremony, in which we also acknowledge the past so that we can shape a better future. It's very important to talk about the past events of 48, to acknowledge what has happened, and so that we can also work toward a better future that is rooted in justice and equality and dignity. And we also do other stuff, including advocacy efforts, building a joint community, because what if the occupation ends tomorrow? Are we ready as people to live together and acknowledge each other, acknowledge our humanity? It's very important what we have been doing for the last 20 years, building this joint community of Palestinians and Israelis, having these kind of not only dialogue programs, but also joint action against occupation, against the oppressive systems in all of its forms.
Well, thank you very much, Rana. That's so inspiring and moving, the work that you're doing. And during your work, I mean, I just wonder, I think the audience would be interested knowing what kind of difficulties and challenges you encounter in working and meeting together, and how do you manage to overcome them? How do you sustain this work when there might be obstructions in the way, and physically be able to meet together? That could be Eszter or Rana. I'm very happy for anyone of you to answer that.
Okay, so like since the 7th of October, there are a lot of limitations for Palestinians. Even freedom of movement within the West Bank is limited, and sometimes people, like, there is an internal checkpoint, so not for coming into Israel proper, but a checkpoint that basically can close the northern part and the southern part of the West Bank. And we have activists and colleagues who live in the north. Our office and a lot of our activities are more in the south part of the West Bank. So sometimes you just don't know, like they leave Ramallah, let's say, at 8 in the morning, and they can come in at 12 o'clock to the office, which if you drive the parallel road in Israel will take maximum an hour and a half. And this is just because one checkpoint, one soldier decided to close it, sometimes with no reason at all. So that's just one example to give, but obviously, as Rana mentioned before, in the north of the West Bank, the situation is much, much more terrible now. Also, since the ceasefire started in Gaza, the army set up something like 800 or more than 800 new roadblocks and gates closing the cities. So it's very, very scary, and a lot of times we plan activities that they need to be cancelled because of this situation, but we don't give up. We are in fact one of the very few organizations that keep on meeting. Also, our office in Beit Jala, since basically all the other places where binational meetings could be held closed down or don't accept binational meetings at the moment, became a hub also for other peace NGOs and groups to meet, which we are of course happy and proud to welcome them as well. We luckily found a Bedouin camp in the south of the West Bank, where we organized already a few sleepover activities in tents and with the bonfire and no shower and all this. But it's more important for us to meet than to have like good conditions. And on the Israeli side, of course, like we also face people being more scared coming to Palestine, crossing checkpoints, what will happen. So we just usually explain them that for Israelis it's actually not such a big thing to do so. And most of the people get convinced and come, and some don't want to come, but then, you know. We also have meetings on Zoom, and we have other activities that happen in Israel connecting to the Palestinian cause, also a lot of demonstrations. So we can offer other activities to Israelis who don't want to come to the West Bank at the moment. And obviously, Palestinians can't come to Israel since the 7th of October. Before that, there were permits for peace activists, and they are completely cancelled together with most of the work permits, which is obviously a disaster especially for Palestinians, but on the longer term, it's going to be a disaster also for Israel. And it's not this ban on permits is not lifted just because the very, very extreme right-wing parties in the government, because even half of the government agrees, but they don't do it because they want to please the other half.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Eszter. I wonder, sort of looking ahead for this year, in terms of your activities, and what are you planning for this year? Especially, it's been such a difficult sort of 15 months, and I think the audience would love to hear what you're doing in the months to come.
Okay. Actually, we're in the tree planting season right now in the West Bank, and what we are focusing right now on is the steadfastness of these communities that can't reach their lands or are facing some violence by settlers or the military. And our next activities this month and in February are focused on planting olive trees on these lands and helping the farmers to reach to their lands and plant. And as I mentioned previously, we are actually now working on organizing the joint memorial ceremonies The Israeli-Palestinian Memorial Ceremony will take place on the 29th of April, and the joint Nakba ceremony will take place on the 15th of May. And both ceremonies are live streamed on the same day of the event, and everyone can actually register and watch them live from their homes. It's a big community, and it's a very emotional and powerful events that I encourage everyone to be part of. And we have also different works like doing tours for the diplomatic community in Israel and Palestine to the lands of Area C, especially in the Jordan Valley, and to actually document all the violations that the people are facing because of the settlers in these areas. And we have also upcoming an international American group visiting the land and touring with CFP activists to see our work on the ground and to hear from people from these communities and their life experiences and how they can support them. And so this is basically what we are focusing on, and we have our educational programs. Our next cohort of the Freedom School starts in March, and we're very excited about to have a new young people joining our programs and learning and training them to become the next peace activists in the movement.
Great, thank you. And the really related question to both of you is, what keeps your hope alive, and what is your hope for the future? Maybe Eszter.
Yeah, I think the meeting with new people who all of a sudden, no matter how difficult is the situation, decide that they want to join the movement is always very, very moving. Recently, we are connected with a few left-wing Russian activists who left Russia because of the war and because they have Jewish origins. Israel is basically the only country that accepts them. So it's a very controversial situation to be in, and then they find themselves coming with us to pick olives or to demonstrations in the West Bank. And these stories of young people, like they are in their 20s, not giving up, and even when they escape their own country, their own conflict, they choose to join our struggle. That's like one of the examples I can give of seeing hope, that people are so committed to justice and creating freedom everywhere, no matter where they are. Yeah, so that's just one example, but it's a very strong one. And also coalitions with other organizations, projects that we do together, and finding the common language also when we don't fully agree or we don't fully work on the same field, but like putting the common goal forward, that's also something that gives hope.
Rana? Thank you, Eszter.
I think it's also very similar for me. It's the resilience of our community, our team, our staff, despite all the challenges and the difficult circumstances, we never give up. Like, we don't have the privilege to lose hope because this is our homeland, and we're working for a better future for everyone who consider this our homeland. It gives me hope that being part of such a courageous joint community, when I see us all together, whether at an activity, restoring water wells in the Jordan Valley, or planting trees in Bethlehem Hills, or doing something together to change the current reality and build a better future, it actually gives me hope, because we can see that it is possible. Peace is possible because we are embodying in the present the future that we want to bring about. We're doing it on a smaller scale, so it is possible to be on a bigger scale. And if we can do it, then it's possible. And that's we hope to be a model for the others to be part of this work and the struggle to change the current reality and build a future that is that guarantees that everyone who lives between the river and the sea will live in dignity, in justice, in equality, and in liberty.
Thank you very much. It's so inspiring, and it's been a real privilege to have been given the opportunity to share this. How can we in Oxfordshire or our audience from across the country, how can we support this work of peace that you're doing? And I think Isabel will share some links in the chat in terms of donations and so on, but how can we support this amazing and wonderful work that you're doing in such difficult circumstances? And that's Rana or Eszter, any one of you really.
First of all, I know that also in the UK there is a very, very polarized reality. We hear about all the demonstrations and talks and sometimes disagreements within friends and family. So our message is basically that in order to create peace everywhere in the world, and specifically for us in the land in Israel, Palestine, the way forward is to choose humanity, is to choose the path where we see ourselves and the other as equal human beings who deserve exactly the same treatment, and accepting that eventually we will both stay. The Palestinians will not go anywhere. Most of the Jewish Israelis will also not go anywhere, also because they don't have anywhere to go. None of these people, no matter what Trump thinks that it's possible, eventually we will stay, and the best way for us is to find a political solution to end the conflict, to end the occupation. And the very first step that needs to be taken is to accept that all human beings need equal rights and equal treatment. So when you meet people that claim that one is right and one is wrong, and because of that, which might also be true, but the consequence saying that, okay, then the one who is wrong should go and the one who is right should stay, tell them that that's not going to lead anywhere, just to more violence. So that's like a very, very clear and basic message that we bring, and I think it's very much needed everywhere. And if your partners of conversation are open to a bit more, then I would suggest like also to, open their hearts for compassion, for also understanding the suffering of the other side. This is what we are doing always, and it's very, very amplified during the war, to carry the pain of both. Like that's also what we are doing on the Joint Memorial Day, on the Joint Nakba Day, to say that suffering is suffering and we need to stop it for the sake of all of us. So that's something that can be done. And obviously, there is much more to it. If you want to organize another similar meeting to another community, we are happy to come and talk. If you want to organize a public or a group screening for Memorial Day or for Nakba ceremony, we will have a team supporting people who do such events with a set of questions, with maybe a preparation Zoom or a reflection Zoom afterwards. So that's also a possibility to join. And we will also have quite soon a webinar discussing on all the extreme right-wing movements in Europe and how our European friends and in general people who believe in peace can act in these times. So we will send it to Heather-Jane and you can forward it to everyone when we will have an exact date for that webinar. And we have from time to time, you can also subscribe to our newsletter, so you will receive all the news, follow us on social media. And obviously, money is always a good thing that we can invest in making ourselves sustainable.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Eszter. It's the last 15 months were very, very challenging and difficult for many communities across our country. And I just want to share with you that in Oxfordshire and the Thames Valley, we established a faith and civic and community leaders group, bringing together all the prominent leaders from across the county. And we stood and have done a number of peace vigils across the county, and the Thames Valley supported groups, new groups to be set up, to bring communities together, to work for understanding, to work for friendship. And that's how we've responded. So, and that's across our communities, the Jewish community, Christians, Muslims, people of no faith have come together and stood for peace. And that's what we all pray for Israelis and Palestinians. But thank you so much. It's been so inspiring listening to you both. So grateful. And my bit's over now. I'm going to pass you on to Liz, who will help with the questions that people have put to us. So thank you so much.
Right. Hello, everyone, again. I've been making little notes of the questions that have been appearing in the chat. So if it's okay with everyone, I'll try and read from the questions directly. So one question from David Bennett: what do you see for the future? Is a lasting peace with justice possible? To either Rana or Eszter or both.
It's definitely possible. As we mentioned, we envision a future that all people living on this homeland will live in peace, in dignity, in justice, in equality, in liberty, with respect to everyone's human rights. If we don't have this vision for the future, it will be difficult for us to actually continue to do the work that we do. But this actually what motivates us to continue and not to give up, is that the vision for the future, and we can see it. And it doesn't matter what the solution will be on this land. We hear different perspectives about two-state solution, one-state solution, confederation. I think what really matters is that any solution needs to be agreed upon between the two parties. It shouldn't be imposed on us. We should be part of the conversation and the decision to have the right to self-determination, to statehood, and that any solution have to be built on principles of peace and that actually meets the needs of both people for security and freedom.
Thank you. Eszter, would you like to add?
Yeah, we just had a conversation today with ex-combatants from a lot of countries, including Northern Ireland. And the one from Northern Ireland said that the peace treaty didn't bring what they expected because there is no peace, there is no end of the conflict, but at least it transforms from a very, very violent conflict to a non-violent one. So it went to the realm of culture and religion and education, but at least they are not killing each other. So I think that's something to cling on to, at least for me at the moment, that the differences will always be there, even within Israeli society and within Palestinian society. You have a lot of differences, but that doesn't mean that the different ethnic groups or different kind of cultures, they want to kill each other. So I think if we can get to this point, that will be very good. And in Northern Ireland also, they didn't know that the peace treaty will come. If you would ask them like 6-7 years before that, I think no one would guess that there will be such treaty. So that actually gives hope that it can just happen. Or what happened in Syria, we don't know what's going to be the future, but that a very, very violent and oppressing regime after 50 years, because of all the internal and external circumstances, could fail. That means that it can also happen elsewhere.
So that's a very good insight. Thank you very much. There's a quick question here, which is rather an interesting one. Are there any members of Combatants for Peace in the Knesset or in the PA, which I take it is the Palestinian Authority? So do you have any friends in high places?
As members, no, we don't have people in political positions. I think some maybe Palestinian members were part of the PA at some point, or still are working in like government places. But we do not have members, but we try to reach out to the Knesset and like to advocate also in these political platforms, not only, even though we believe that change comes from the bottom up, but we have also come to understand that we can do that in parallel also with doing some political engagements within locally and internationally, speaking to decision makers and Congress members, diplomat communities. It's very important to do the work on the two levels together, because based on what we have seen over the last year and the difficult circumstances that we have been experiencing, and we felt the need for us as civil society to be part of the decision making and to amplify our voices, because we have witnessed the poor performance of our governments to lead us during this year, and we felt the responsibility for us as civil society and grassroots movements to lead our communities during this difficult time, to try to bridge the gap between the two communities and to rebuild the trust again, and continue to work on that level.
Thank you. Again, Eszter, would you like to add?
No, we can go to the next question.
Right. But it certainly is important to try to work at the political level as well. These things shift at many different levels. So there's a question here based on sort of conflict resolution theory. Is the situation now nearer to a hurting stalemate, which could lead to resolution of the conflict, than it was on the 6th of October 2023, or is it further away? So a hurting stalemate, has that been reached?
I think it's very, very hard to know. What we say is that we certainly don't want to go back to the 6th of October, because for a lot of people, it might seem as some kind of a normality, but it wasn't. So when Gaza was under siege and also the West Bank was under very, very harsh military oppression, that's not something that we want to advocate for to go back to. Some people say that it will become even worse than this, and then the solution will come. We don't know. I really hope just for our normal daily life that it's not going to get worse, but at this point, I'm not sure. It can also happen. And having said this, it doesn't mean that the solution will not come. We just don't know when.
Thank you. Rana, any thoughts?
Yeah, basically, it's also like it's hard to imagine like what's gonna happen next, because also with this current American administration, with Trump in office, there is a lot of fear of what's coming next, and despite all the proposals and promises, it's very hard to expect what the next steps will be. We have seen the last year how the international community was pushing back towards the two-state solution, and it's back on the table and the discussions, but we're not sure how serious this will happen. Also with maybe with the normalization with Saudi Arabia in the next phase, maybe this will lead to a more solution in the region. But it's very hard. It's very difficult to tell. I think more there is a lot of international factors that are also like have their influence in this region.
Mm. Yes, it is very difficult to see the future. But yeah. Quick question, is the right-wing element at the moment dictating what will happen?
In Israel, definitely, unfortunately, they are in the government, and as long as the government won't fall, they are the ones deciding.
Rana, is that enough of an answer at the moment?
Yeah, unfortunately. We're facing the most extremist right-wing government in Israel for a long time. And yeah, the situation just keeps getting worse.
Well, if it's any help, just as in Northern Ireland, it was very difficult to know what was going to happen in the future back in South Africa during the apartheid years. And because people did reach out to each other and realized that they had to find a political solution, in fact, a political solution was found. And it was surprising. And I lived through that period, and you went to a peace meeting and it was now official that you could sit around with the police and the army and all the different parties which had been killing each other. And here they were sitting around the table saying, okay, we've got a problem. How do we solve it together? And you just had to pinch yourself. It was absolutely amazing. So I do pray that you get to that point. I think we've covered most of the questions. Apologies to one or two that didn't get in, but I think it's now time for me to hand over to Michael Hilton. And thank you very much indeed, Rana and Eszter.
Well, thank you, Liz, and thank you, Imam Monawar, for asking the questions, and thank you to Rana and Eszter. There will be a formal thank you at the end. For now, I've been asked to give a few reflections on what I've heard. And what I've heard at the start sounded very bleak. A lot about war, 898 checkpoints, Israelis not knowing what's going on in the West Bank, scared visitors, cancelled permits, people with nowhere else to go but feeling trapped. But as the hour wore on, I heard more and more positive things. So many of them, just such a long list about courage and shared humanity and healing and transformation and education and a freedom school and living together and tree planting and setting strong examples and building common languages and understanding the suffering of the other and resilience, just so much of it. And it certainly came across to me that though the peace organizations, both Combatants for Peace and so many other peace and interfaith organizations in Israel and Palestine, although they may seem and often are small, and although most people, most of the time, certainly on the main media, don't hear them, what you are doing, what they are doing, is really very, very powerful indeed. And there was one phrase that particularly stood out for me. It was right at the beginning when I heard changing dead stones into living stones. And I've been thinking about that the whole hour, and it seems such a important thing to do. Firstly, because there's so much literal rebuilding to be done. We have one of our prayers, Jewish prayers, Uvenei Yerushalayim, asking God to build or rebuild Jerusalem. And of course, it's not just Jerusalem, it's even more so Gaza, the physical work of setting stone upon stone in an area which traditionally uses stone for building. But of course, building is metaphorical as well. We don't just build buildings, we build peace, build hope, we build love. So that's what's come out of it for me. Something positive and hopefully something lasting. And we're going to go straight on now to our closing prayers, which will be from me and from Charlotte and Monawar. And as I have the floor, I will say mine first, which is a traditional Jewish evening prayer. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chayim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, v'taknenu b'etza tova mufanecha, v'hoshienu l'ma'an shemecha. Source of our life and our sovereign, cause us to lie down tonight in peace and rise up again tomorrow to life. Spread over us the covering of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel and rescue us for the sake of your name. And be a protective shield about us, turning away every enemy, every plague, every disease, every violence, all hunger, and all grief. And remove the adversary, Satan, Shaitan, from before us and from after us, and shelter us in the shadow of your wings, for you are a God of protection and guarding, a ruler of mercy and compassion. Guard us whenever we go out and whenever we come in, so we may enjoy peace, not just in the future, but now and always. Praised be to you, God, who spreads the shadow of peace over your holy places, over Jerusalem, over Gaza, over Beirut, Amman, Ramallah, Beit Lechem, and over the whole world. Amen. Charlotte.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Michael, for those words and that prayer. So I ask you to join me in a prayer for the world and for the work of Combat for Peace. Lord God, have mercy on your world. We pray for good relations between nations, for greater concern for the plight of those who suffer because of political conflicts, for kindness to refugees and strangers, and for a renewed commitment on the part of our leaders to work together for flourishing and prosperity and peace. Help the work of Rana and Eszter for all those who want to build peace and hope and love in their communities, to recognize that all humans need equal right and equal treatment. Lord of all, we call on you for harmony of the human race, for peace between nations, and in places of conflict, bring us your healing. In places of oppression, bring us your protection. And in places of power, bring us your love and compassion, so that we all may be models to build a future, embodying the present for the children of the world that they will inherit. May grassroots movements flourish to rebuild trust, dignity, equality, and peace between all men, women, children, and mankind. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer this evening. Amen.
Thank you very much, Charlotte and Rabbi Michael, for those moving prayers. I also share a short prayer. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu alayka Sayyid al-Mursaleen wa ala alika wa ashabika ajma'in. Send thy peace, O Lord, which is perfect and everlasting, that our souls may radiate peace. Send thy peace, O Lord, that we may think, act, and speak harmoniously. Send thy peace, O Lord, that amidst our worldly strife we may seek peace, reconciliation, and healing. Send thy peace, O merciful Lord, that we, thy children on earth, may all unite as one family. Amen.
Well, it falls to me now. I have the privilege of saying thank you, so many thank yous. Thank you to the whole team that brought this together, to Oxford Three Faiths, that I'm also a part of, to OxPeace, and my colleagues in Spirit of Peace, particularly Isabel, who has really masterminded the behind the scenes things tonight, and it's gone incredibly smoothly. And so really want to say thank you to you, Isabel. But of course, especially to Rana and to Eszter, who have given us such an inspiring talk today. And I'd echo the words of Rabbi Michael, who said that it started with a feeling of gloom and the sheer scale of difficulty, pain, injustice. but you've moved us to a place of hope, not just by your words, but because you are modeling the change that you want to see. And we hope that we might all be doing that. I believe very much in building friendships across the world, friendships for peace and global flourishing. And I think the events like these can help us to do that. And it's through these networks and relationships that peace and healing can flow. Thank you, Rana. Thank you for Eszter, for the incredible bravery, for the incredible eloquence with which you spoke, and for the hope that you have brought us all. And that hope, I believe, will sow seeds, because when people feel hope, then they feel empowered to act. And so we hope that that will be a result of today's conversation with you both. I think I have to mention a couple of things. I think the main thing now is that we'll soon unmute everybody so that people can say thank you and goodbye, good night. But after that, we're going to have some end screens which will give you the contact details of the various organizations that have taken part tonight, and of course of Combatants for Peace. And very importantly, there will be an end screen which will tell you how you can donate to help Combatants for Peace. And we will look at the other ways that we can help too. And I'm sure that we'll be discussing it, our teams that have been hosting tonight, and others that I see in the chat who are very keen to be able to support your work. So I think it's good night from all of us to each other. Isabel will unmute, and then after that, after about a minute, we will have the end screens with a little bit of music. It'll be in a loop, so the screens will come up a couple of times. So if you miss something, we'll go back and you'll be able to see the information that you're hoping to get. So thank you to all the participants tonight, the amazing things going on in the chat.